Strands by Martin Dempsey. Chapter 2. Anchor. The body was that of a muscular male, his skin tanned with a slightly ruddy hue, tattoos on the arms and upper back, shaven head with signs of male pattern baldness, wearing a smart casual dress shirt and tapered pinstripe dress pants trousers. The shoes were tapered almost to winkle picker dimensions, and the belt around the waist displayed a prominent high-fashion logo. Smith noticed that the body's fingernails, short to the point of bitten but buffed to a fine polish, possibly a manicure. The stubble was also carefully shaped, not just the result of a growth between shaves. The body now smelt like death, and the victim appeared to have vomited, but there was a hint of cologne and possibly maple syrup. Smith took another look at the male torso. The trapezius muscles were highly developed, and Smith noticed some cauliflower ear cartilage damage on both ears. The arms were down by his sides, which was odd. The expected reaction surely would have been to put them out to slow the fall. Possibly he was unconscious or on the way as he dropped. Smith noted the shoes, dress shoes with very little grip on the sole. On the linoleum tiles of the apartment entrance area, there would have been little grip, but any scuffling wouldn't necessarily leave traces. Next to the body was an open gym duffel bag. Inside, from the angle Smith could see it from, there appeared to be a plastic water bottle, a red towel, what looked to be like some compression-style leggings and top, hand wraps, gloves, mouth guard, finger tape, and several yellow banana skins opened down the side rather than peeled from the top. One of the officers squeezed past him. Smith looked up from the area around the body, the flat partitioned away. One of the windows was open, and as this was the third floor, Smith could see level to the flat opposite and some of the roof. "Officer," Smith said, addressing the uniformed man standing at the apartment's entrance. "Yes, sir. You don't have to call me sir. Could you please have someone find out which flat number that is and then send someone around to ask if they happen to see anything?" "Yes, sir. Do you think this will turn into something?" "Possibly." "Third floor, door locked from the inside. Possibly an overdose, but no drugs yet found on site. Plus, the expression. Terror. Sheer terror." "No, officer, I don't know him, except to say hello. What happened? Suicide?" "It's Agent. May I ask why you think it might be suicide?" "You heard him scream, you said?" "Sure did. He opened the door and I saw the devil. Well, I've never seen him with any family, and he seems the type, I suppose. So was it some kind of accident?" "The type? The type to commit suicide. Isolated, lonely, broken English, unconventional lifestyle." "Lifestyle?" Smith had a fair idea, but he wanted it in her words. "He came back with men most Friday nights out here. Conversation. They'd not stay too long, they'd leave. Plus, I remember he once told me he was training for a fight. Head trauma is related to suicide risk. I heard that on the radio once." "This is important, please. Can you try to remember the last time you recall his bringing a man back to the apartment with him?" "Last Friday week, I think. And it's what, Tuesday? So yeah, and then." "Did you happen to see this man?" "No, officer. Heard him. Didn't see him." "Agent, do you know if this was the man he'd had around before?" "How would I know that?" "Accent, vehicle parked outside, mention of a name, anything like that. I don't, but I got the impression that they were all different men, that they weren't staying too long. His bedroom shares a wall that backs onto ours. Um, so, so were there any activity last night you think you might have heard it? I think I would have. I'd knocked on the wall before now. Now we just play music. Doesn't hardly ever last long, though. And you don't remember him talking to anyone in the hall before he went into his flats? Anything like that? No, officer. Just ran up the stairs whistling, shaking his keys, and not being quiet with his latch as always. Agent. Shaking his keys? Jangling something. Thank you. There's a good chance someone from my department or the local branch might be in touch with you in the future, possibly for a coroner's inquiry, which you may be asked to speak, and you may be contacted in the future to make a statement. Mm-hmm. Ma'am, thank you for your time. You've been very helpful. Are you sure you heard jangling? Jangling or clanking? Clacking, maybe? Keys, I thought. They weren't keys, she heard. It was coins, Smith said. Walters only had one key, his latch key, and that was on a leather fob, which wouldn't have jangled. He also had a bunch of coins in his side pocket. That's a place most people don't leave spare change. It falls out when you sit down, make a noise. Plus, he had a wallet in his back pocket, and it had a compartment for coins. I think he had a fistful of coins as he ran up the stairs and was jangling them. So, what do you take that to mean? Clark was perched on her desk facing Smith, who was also sitting on his. They both had coffee. I think he'd just paid someone for something and gotten change. Drug dealers don't give change. It's one of the reasons why they always ask for a nice round number, as bills are easier. The nearest corner shop is about 5 minutes walk away. I think Walters took a taxi, which means if he were with someone, the driver would have seen him or her, Clark confirmed. Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'll call around local taxi firms. You want the open source? Clark was referring to her findings from those online and publicly available sources of information about the deceased, for which she didn't need to ask for any legal authorization to access. Please. Oh, wait. What time are you off? She shook her head. Not until 5. I have an hour and 10 minutes. Okay, I don't want to keep you. Also, there's no need for overtime on this yet. Smith paused for a beat and then added with a hint of irony, and he's not going anywhere. Clark gave a courtesy half smile. Okay, Barry Stormy Walters. He had just turned a full time as a mixed martial arts fighter. Stormy Walters. Nice. They all have nicknames, apparently. And apparently they don't all get branding advice. Yeah, that raised a genuine smile from Clark. He's been in the flat 4 years, has regular payments to Courage MMA Gym, a little further into the centre of the city, doesn't have a car or any other vehicles registered to him, and his main income for the last 18 months or so has been a few fairly sizable payments from fight promotions. He does have social media, which I'm looking further into. I think I've identified a sister or a half sister or sister in law in Brazil. Somebody in community source support is reaching out to her to check any intimate partners. Um, there's no profiles tagged as being in a relationship with him or anything like that. Oh, and anything he's in, he's put single. When's the coroner due? This one has a rush on, but I think they all do. I think Monday they said, do you want to push for fast track? Smith drew in a breath. I don't know. Maybe I might go back and have another good look at the apartment. This one doesn't really add up, to coin a phrase, because a locked door. Smith started listing as if counting his fingers. Locked door, only way out of the open window, but it's 3 stories up. Guy's built like a tank and knows how to fight. Dead of undefined causes, face down behind the door, vomit as if some kind of opiate, yet described as running up the stairs and basically kicking open the door immediately prior to hearing a scream. None of this adds up. For the next hour and 10 minutes, Clark continued to type up interview notes and document crime scene records and photographs. Smith sat at his desk reading through witness statements and filling out applications to view CCTV footage and applications for overtime funding and additional personnel. Without asking Clark, he put a name down and that of Agent Ashton as his requested key support officers. Once Clark had said her goodbyes, donned her coat, and powered down her computer, Smith spent an additional hour of unclocked, unpaid time combing again through the scene's details, finally jotting down some notes and questions to run by the coroner. His notes ran: Stormy Walters, narcotics, stomach contents, Rohypnol, opiates, entrance area, bathroom used, where were keys, any glaring abnormalities, brain trauma, concussion, training partners, online accounts, dating. Smith knocked back the last of his now cold coffee, coagulated sugar scraping over the tip of his tongue. As the bittersweet mouthful slid down his throat, his mind performed some quick calculations. He had a microwave lasagna at home, so he didn't have to cook. Quick shower. There was nothing he felt obliged to watch, as he knew about nothing which was going to be on tonight. There was no need to call his mother until the weekend at the earliest. He could easily make it to Walter's flat and back to his own in less than 2 hours. He can be in bed by 11 and still get 6 to 7 hours sleep. Later, ducking under the tape, Smith attempted to flick on his flashlight's torch. It clicked on, but the small pool of light flickered and dimmed almost immediately. Giving up without a fight, Smith slapped a palm against the wall until he found a light switch, which turned on immediately. Apart from the absence of a body, the apartment was exactly as he remembered it. Smith stood still for a few breaths, letting his eyes soak up any small details he might have overlooked. Satisfied there was nothing he'd missed, he moved to the main room. There was a notable absence of conventional furniture. Several screw-fixed plate dumbbells with various amounts of weight were placed neatly against one wall. A foam exercise mat was rolled up next to them, on top of it a foam roller and several exercise bands. Next to this collection of equipment, there were a stack of shoe boxes. Smith walked over and checked inside. They were all full of trainers, varying from worn nearly through to close to brand new. The walls of this room were bare. Only the large LED TV screen on the wall facing the weights and the other fitness gear provided any focal point for attention in the room. Smith situated himself approximately where he imagined Walters would have been while using some of the kit, which seemed to be the sole reason for the area, and looked around. The room led into a small kitchen, and on the floor next to one set of cupboards. Smith made his way into the kitchen and noticed the door on the tiny refrigerator wasn't fully closed. A light pressure from his fingertips opened it, and inside Smith saw an open and nearly totally empty gallon-sized container of milk, missing its lid, a closed jar of peanut butter, and some salad vegetables in a bowl. Turning to take in the rest of the kitchen, empty sink, plate and cutlery for one resting in a drying tray, plastic kettle, empty hob, microwave telling the correct time, Smith noticed a small pile of white powder a good 5 or 6 yards from the washing dryer, which sat against the flat wall of the sink. Smith walked over, intrigued. Suspecting cocaine, Smith got lower, hands on his knees, and noted the powder didn't catch the light, but was flat and powdery. He opened the cupboard and looked inside. The first shelf his eyes rested upon contained several commercial bottles of vitamins and supplements, and a large plastic Ziploc commercial bag of Maxi Output Ultimate Creatine powder, with similar matching traces of powder around it, and a tiny 5 milliliter scoop lying face down. Next to it was a small stack of packets of ibuprofen. Mildly disappointed, Smith made his way to the entrance and looked through into the bedroom. Despite his job role, there was something distasteful about nosing around the bedroom of a recently deceased person, so he immediately decided to wait for the autopsy before venturing forth. Smith turned and looked into the tiny bathroom, which led off the entrance area. A bottle of cologne stood on the small glass shelf above the sink, alongside some nail clippers. Smith let his eyes roam around the bathroom. Grey tiles. There was a small window which was unlatched on the inside, but it was high up. Smith would need to balance his weight between the rim of the bathtub and the sink to even attempt to pull himself up, and the window would barely fit his shoulders. It would be possible for someone, a small person, be that a woman or younger male or teenager, to climb up and out, but Smith had to check the outside of the building. Below the window was a two-story bare wall, punctuated by other smaller windows, and as such, Smith and the other people investigating the death had ruled it out as a point of egress or regress. The bath had a shower curtain, and it was pretty filthy by most standards. The plastic side of the bath poked out by the base of the sink. Next to that corner, which seemed warped upon closer examination, the white rubber water seal was pulled back. Smith walked over, bent down, put on a latex glove, and ran a finger along the edge of the plastic panel. It immediately popped loose. Smith leaned forward and saw a plaid travel toiletry bag. Smith retrieved it, gently shook it, noticing the clink of glass, and opened the zipper. Inside he made out what he suspected were a dozen or so jars, foil sealed vials, with white stick-on labels with symbols he took to be Cantonese, a few plastic syringes, and 2 cases of disposable needles. Yes, they're with the lab. I took photos of my own too. I've pinged them over to you. You can add those to the case file as the evidence record. Smith was perched on his desk again, in almost the exact position as yesterday, and Clark, as she often would, got stuck by just how badly days can merge into one another in an office environment. Her memories of her morning run by the river, during which she was listening to a new album, were rapidly retreating. Would you like me to request a fast track for these? Clark said, swiveling in her chair to reach for a pen. Yes, please. They were labelled Trenable in Cantonese, at least according to the search I did, but we don't know for sure that's what's in them. We need to rule out contaminated steroids on the market, deliberately misplaced substances, overdose, and so on and so on. I know you just got in, but any word back from the autopsy? I asked to give us an ETA when I sent the forms over. They're usually pretty good, so I'm suspecting we might get something this evening. Clark scrawled a reminder on a post-it note. I'm going to get some coffee. Do you want some? Clark shook her head and gestured towards her takeout cup. Smith bumped off his perch and made his way into the office shared kitchen, where he poured heated coffee into a mug and added milk from the refrigerator. He noted a bunch of bananas with a post-it note on them bearing the name of another person in the office. Smith paused. There were banana skins in the gym bag, Smith said, this over half the office away as he made his way back to the team's working area. In the gym bag? Clark asked. Of the deceased. There were empty banana skins in it. Why would he keep the skins? Laying out in a bag like that, it would make the gym kits stink. That's why would he to put in a weird fitness shake or something? No, I was thinking of that, but very doubtful. Smith shook his head. Why? Smith half shrugged. No blender in the kitchen. So, if there was someone else in the apartment, staying there perhaps, I think he or she ate them and put the banana skins back in the bag. Maybe it was someone other than the deceased who screamed, or the sound came from somewhere outside or something. I'll head right back over now and collect them and forward them to the lab. We need stomach contents, a timeline for the browning of empty banana skins, and DNA swabs of the skins. Tell them I'm coming over directly. The DNA might be fresher from them being kept in the cold. If anyone asks for me, that's where I'll be, but I'll have my phone. When I'm there, I'll ask for an update. I'll see you in a couple of hours. In the coroner's office, it was predictably cold. The Smith had decided yet again to stick it out with just a button-down shirt on, and yet again immediately regretted it. When he arrived without any preamble, Dr. Belknap simply nodded a greeting, reached for his clipboard, and immediately began. His major muscle groups are in a state of spasm, consistent with dehydration, some form of extenuation, seizure, or cadavic spasm. The spasm. Cavill found reaching for the words harder while gazing into the cloudy eyes of a dead body. Cadaveric. Cadaveric, yes. How is that different to rigor mortis if it is? Sorry, I've not heard that term recently, I don't think. Rigor is easily overdone. Dr. Belknap studied utensils as he talked. It's stiffening caused by chemical changes post-death, coagulation. Cadaveric suggests the muscles were intensely contracted during or immediately prior to death. He was an MMA guy. Could this follow an intense workout? No, he needs to have been working out immediately before deadlifting or something similar. I understood that he was found in the entrance area of his apartment. The clothes were also evening casual. Smith nodded. Despite both men avoiding eye contact and busying themselves, Belknap were aligning scalpels. Smith with his notes. Cause of death. Indeterminate. Doc. In, Belknap said with emphasis on each syllable, determinate. Most likely heart failure, but there is what seems to be multi-organ failure. Don't ask me for a time of death. There's defensive wounds and dermal abrasions, some consistent with what you'd expect given the possession of the body and the presumed fall face forwards into the wall, none of which are conspicuous and which most seem fully healed. His father says he's a combat sports athlete. They're what I'd expect to see. He's severely dehydrated. His heart is slightly larger and thicker than I'd expect, and his blood volume is very low. He also regurgitates in the manner I'd expect to see in a case of opiate overdose, although most of what was saliva and foam. There's a very high level of dioxide in his blood, which I expect to see in somebody falling or forgetting to breathe due to paralytic effects during an overdose. The vials found in the bathroom, labeled tronabone, and the substance seems viscous enough. The test won't take long. If it's tren, that would explain the hypergonadism, the thickening of the heart wall, and the punch marks in the buttocks. There's also a recent ones on the trapezius muscles, close to the side of his neck too. Site injection is often used by bodybuilders, but the evidence supports added hypertrophy is mostly anecdotal. Smith scribbled, paused, and then asked, hypertrophy is increase in muscle size, thickness, fluid capacity. In this case, it may have been a dirty needle. There's pretty nasty swelling around the punches. I might not have noticed them. Why would an MMA fighter want bigger traps? Hmm, some aesthetics maybe? I mean, they wouldn't help with fighting, I don't think. Okay, the banana skins. Anything? Nothing yet, but that's not really my area. I saw them and I looked at the cut open down the side of a knife or a blade. So if this is ruled a killing, you might find a suspect with a pocket knife. I could check for it for fructose and see if there's somehow tied back to the bananas, but it seems a long shot. The cause of death is up there, but there's so many things that don't make sense. Death by misadventure looks like the most probable outcome, but there are all these weird little things that make it look really dodgy. Did the tox screen come back with anything? Nothing yet. We tested it for all the big hitters as usual. There might be a ding for serotonin, which would really be noteworthy as most people take reuptake inhibitors, not inject the stuff. And doing so could be catastrophic. It could result in blood clots, etc. Smith looked up. Does that explain it? Say if someone shot him with a needle full of serotonin. It could, I suppose. It'd be a major contributor. If combined with a lot of stress, if they'd been fighting or making out, the victim had taken an opiate, if the perp shot him with a huge dose as part of a misguided sex game or some um, oh, uninformed sexual preparation, possibly. Anything else? Anything at all? Anything odd, noticeable, unusual? He was fully erect, the doctor said without emotion. Smith stifled a throat clearing. The doctor continued. It's not uncommon as people think. I'd usually expect to see that during a sex game gone wrong, any kind of asphyxiation, but not what looks like multiple organ failure exacerbated by circumstance and substance stacking. You'd expect it with kink, but not klutz. The doctor laid the last scalpel of a set down and switched off the lamp, indicating the conversation was reaching a conclusion. Basically, anything else? Anything at all? Smith was already closing his notebook, expecting nothing. Uh, well, I wasn't going to mention this, but he's light. He's very light. Light? It's a relative thing. I didn't put it in the report, but it might have been on drastic weight cut or something. He's recently checked out of the fighting committee as part of a health check to complete. He's a good 4 kilograms lighter than he was when he weighed in to this his last fight, which was only a few days ago. Most fighters dehydrate prior to a fight, meaning that he's lighter now than he was when he fought, which is when he should have been at his lightest possible functional weight. He could have been on a crazy diet, had food poisoning, gotten flu, engaged in extensive mind exercise, or simply have attempted to load up with carbs and water and actually gain weight for his fight, but that would have been a long way around to fighting somebody bigger and heavier and probably stronger than you. Now, this is dehydration, though, and that's what tipped him over the edge and killed him. It's a combination tied with all those possible other drugs in the system, maybe serotonin taken intravenously. If it is that, this is about the dumbest attempt to get high I have ever seen. Smith made his way into the building's elevator and took the lift up from the basement to the crime scene's unit floor. Smith managed to turn the wrong way out of the lift and got lost for a minute or two, and found himself waiting for a while outside one of the doors, requiring a security guard to access before he realized, by looking through the wire-reinforced glass, that the team he was after wasn't where he expected them to be sitting. Retracing his steps back to the elevator doors and using the water coolers and plot plants to reorient himself, he relocated the security door he was intending to visit. Despite that, he still had to wait to attempt to catch the eye of someone of the unit members for a good few minutes to be let in, all the while enduring suspicion and appraising glances from the workers walking past him. Smith nudged his visitor landlord into a prominent position as possible and doubled up his efforts by self-consciously waving. As he stood, face close to the glass, intermittently waving at people walking around the office space denied to him, he heard a clacking behind him, faint at first, then getting nearer and nearer. The clacking stopped, and something lightly brushed against one of his shoulder blades. Smith turned and saw Sonia, one of the crime scene technicians he was here to see, directly behind him, holding a takeout coffee in one hand and a folded magazine in the other. "Smith!" she said, grinning. "Hi." Smith smiled back, and the two made a quick shoulder-to-shoulder side hug. "I didn't know what time you'd be here, so I slipped out for coffee. Didn't anyone let you in?" "No, I was just lurking here, hoping someone would take pity on me." "And no one did. They're a cruel and callous bunch up here." Sonia bent at the hips and dangled her lanyard over the black reader at the side of the door. Smith appraised her spine and back muscles under her red business jacket as she did so. When an electronic beep sounded, Smith opened the door wide for her and then followed her inside. The open shared office was filled with bays of flat tables, each with a utilitarian black computer spaced out evenly on them. Many of the workspaces adorned with a clutch of books, a pride of photographs, and occasionally an action figure or whimsical office toy. Several of the work areas had A4 slips of printer paper stuck up between unit names. Sonia moved with practiced ease between the blocks of desks. Smith followed, doing his best to avoid the sharp edges of tables and failing not to watch her hips as she moved. As they both arrived at Sonia's desk, she dropped into an ergonomic chair and gestured for Smith to pull one of the other unoccupied ones. Sonia kicked off her high heels and toe-nudged them under her desk. "Right," she said, leaning forward and laughed. "Fingerprints." "Fingerprints," Smith echoed. "None." "Really?" Genuine surprise added to Smith's emphasis. "Well, the victim's Walters? Just his on the outside of the door. Smudged, but very likely his." Just to butt in, there was a small window in the bathroom. Yep. She nodded, jiggling the top of one of her crossed legs and nibbling her lower lip. "I noticed that, and we checked it. Nothing. Dust, few hairs. That's it. Hairs? Not human, most likely. Short, black, and greasy. Probably rats or mouse hairs, or just something which blew in from the outside." Smith sighed and sat back. "Great." Sonia's smile twisted downwards at the edge of her mouth, suppressing it from growing larger. "Not what you wanted to hear?" I don't know. It could just be a simple heart attack brought on by the side effects of PEDs and weight cutting." "No." Sonia shook her head once in rejection of the idea, and once again to keep her fringe out of her eyes. "Yeah? That's crazy. I saw photos of this man's body. He was like in crazy good shape. I read the report you sent over. He ran up several flights of stairs. several flights of stairs, according to witnesses, 4 or 5, immediately prior to collapsing. Unless he had an aneurysm or something. Maybe he was poisoned. Maybe, I don't know. Smith's eyes slipped out of focus for a second. I can ask around a bit, he said through a sigh. It seems really odd to me. Or maybe it was just some sort of natural misadventure, dehydration, like you said. Smith hoped his feign of exasperation in an attempt to lure Sonia into further conversation and eke out their time together wasn't too obvious. Well, it looks to me like he was the only person in the flat at the time, so I think someone poisoned him or something. Because there's no one in the right mind would try to fight that. He was like kung fu, what's it, built like a brick shithouse. If anyone should feel safe in that flat at night, it was him. If I ever looked like that, I wouldn't even bother locking my doors. The gym stank. No effort had been made to put up air fresheners, decent ventilation, or air conditioning. A couple of fans were going, but they didn't seem to have much effect. The matted area had streaks of what must have been raw sweat all over it, and there was nearly visible mist of exertion in the air. People wearing thin cotton jiu-jitsu suits of various colours were milling around, unwinding tape from their fingers, or sitting touching their toes or arching their backs. Herman, you mean Herman? Said the small, wiry man in the black suit, with a pelt of brown cloth around his waist. To Smith, his eyes didn't look like much when he factored in the bloom of cartilage damage to one of the man's ears and his relaxed, understated confidence. Smith, a man with naturally broad shoulders and who'd boxed for a few years in his college days, wouldn't have wanted to take his chances. Herman's the black guy, the black belt over there in the corner. Don't walk on the mat with your shoes on. Smith took off his shoes by stepping on the heels and walked over the mat. He wanted to attempt to avoid the sweat patches, but Machismo wouldn't let him. The man who'd been pointed out to him as Herman had removed his belt and jacket and was sitting with his legs wide open, reaching over to hold the toes of one of his legs. He had a skin-tight, sweat-soaked top on with a stylized cartoon leopard leaping across the chest. Excuse me, Herman, Smith said. The man looked up. He was handsome despite what appeared to be a once broken nose and 2 helpings of cauliflower ear. Yeah, mate? I was wondering if you could help me, please. I'm investigating the death of Barry Walters. I was told he trained at this gym and attended one of your classes. The man didn't seem to contradict him, so he continued. The afternoon he died, that would have been 2 days ago. Yeah, Barry, I heard. It's a real shame. What was it? Cause of death, I can't comment at the moment. Would you be able to confirm he trained here that day? Yes, mate. Is there anything you could tell me about that session? Anything odd or unusual? Anything at all that drew your attention? No, not really. He was here on time, did the drills, rode with a few other guys at the end, shook hands and left. Barry was like really quiet guy, kept to himself, just wanted to turn up, train. I could tell he wasn't really interested in focusing all that much on jiu-jitsu. He seemed to be doing it more to round out his game, you know. MMA was what he was interested in. He asked a few times to take his jacket off and roll around with people topless after the session ended, and I was just fine with that for the practice of rolling skin to skin, you know. He's only been coming here a few months, so I didn't really talk to him much. He seemed like an all right guy. Herman punctuated every sentence with a micro shrug or a suggestion of a shake of his head. Smith nodded and pretended to take a note. No issues with anyone in the gym. Herman shook his head without any change of facial expression. Smith pressed. No issues with anyone outside of the gym, he might have mentioned. Herman shook his head again, this time with a creeping look of near arrogant disinterest in his eyes that drifted away from Smith and onto his foot, like he was ready to move on and lost interest in the conversation. Smith took the hint and also noted a slight air of disrespect. Knowing the conversation would soon be over, Smith felt emboldened to ask, "And did you know about his use of PEDs?" The brown eyes met his again. The half smile returned. Half the people in this gym are on them. I don't need them myself, but I don't judge people who take them. He was trying to make a living. As long as there's no talk of it on the mat, it's none of my business. Smith summoned the nerve to take the instructor's contact details, but didn't pry any further. As he returned to the edge of the mat, he found that his shoes had been kicked against the wall. Smith's mind continued working. Despite the nature of the deceased's, possibly victim's, occupation and hobbies, there wasn't really enough to gather evidence to suggest that either performance-enhancing drugs nor combat sports had been an instigating factor in his death. Smith figured it was most likely some contamination vials or whatever it was he was taking, or a combination of that and extreme dehydration. Despite the coroner's apparent reluctance to get on board with that narrative, or at least to proactively suggest it, there was a good chance that they could get his death ruled as misadventure and off the books. Smith thanked the tall, student-aged blond man at the front desk and made his way outside, where someone was blowing a steam of sherbet-scented vape condensing into the air. Smith paused briefly to check his messages on his small work phone. There was one flashing unread. He opened it and thereby learnt that a second body, in an almost identical locked room scenario, had been found. These are the case notes of Officer Smith regarding Barry Stormy Walters. Barry Walters was a male, 33, approximately 160 pounds, weight disputed at time of death. Lighter? Caucasian-Pardo, Brazilian heritage suspected, to be confirmed. Not a typical victim of an intruder killer. Firstly, he was male. Secondly, he was a professional cage fighter. Thirdly, he lived on the 6th floor of a set of residential flats within a gated community. If anyone in the city should have felt safe in their home at night, it was him. Barry Stormy Waters had just turned pro as a cage fighter in a local circuit. He wasn't earning a great living, checked bank account, but he had signed a contract with an MMA circuit which allows him to focus on training knockout MMA. Waters had just won an amateur bout with a reasonable payout, roughly enough for 6 months of rent, believed to have taken a taxi straight from the airport to his flat. Note to self, taxi cabs. Check up on that. The Waters crime scene. His flat is small. The front door opens onto a small entrance area with a bathroom on the left and 2 open doors in front of them. The room on the left is the bedroom with a small double bed. The room on the right is the main room with a kitchenette. The main room contains a workout equipment and furniture. The kitchenette is clearly underused. Waters was found at the entrance next to an open gym bag. The bag contains a rag towel, compression gear, wraps and fingerless MMA gloves and banana skins, each open down the side rather than peeled from the top. The small window in the bathroom was open. The bathroom has a stand-up bath shower, and the bath's plastic side is warped and poorly fitting. Beside it is a clear plastic container of syringes, cotton buds, and several vials, expected to be PEDs. The main door had a latch lock, and it was closed and locked behind him. There were no fingerprints other than Waters on the door. DNA searches of the flat are ongoing. There are no CCTV cameras on the block. Waters' body. The body lay with its arms by its sides, despite presumably falling face first. This suggests to me the arms had been pinned by his sides somehow. There are no self-defense wounds on his fists or knuckles. There are no track marks on the floor, suggesting he didn't kick his feet hard or was restrained. There appears to be a small puncture on his neck. Was he shooting PEDs there to avoid detection? Note to self, ask about air bubbles and heart valves. Would that cause him to pass out and bang his head? Walter's muscles seemed to be in a state of spasm, but his heart and breathing stopped in the manner of an opiate overdose. Were it not for the location of the body and the suddenness of his death, the death would have been put down to a mixture of performance-enhancing drugs and recreational drugs. Walters has what appears to be a mat rash on his back, elbows, and knees. Walters' associates. Neighbours barely recognised him. Walters had been living there for just over 18 months, and due to his early morning training sessions and early nights, he rarely as so much as met his neighbours in the hall. Apart from the occasional noisy night with a man he met at the local bars, Walter was an ideal neighbour. The people at his regular gym remember him as quiet.